The Pampas, a vast expanse of grassland. Stretching as far as the eye can see, in the heart of Argentina lies the small town of Poma, known for its cowboys and folklore, and a chilling tale that continues to haunt its people, El Cruz de las Canas, a rural outpost near Poma. Here the land is silent. The darkness runs deep. It was in this desolate place on a cold March night in 2006 that Officer Sergio Poeta encountered the unknown, an experience that would change his life forever. March 2nd, 2006, 10 p.m. Officer Sergio Poeta began his routine patrol. His motorcycle hummed through the night, a familiar sound in the vast emptiness. The air was still, the stars a million pinpricks of light above him. Poeta, a seasoned officer, felt the familiar calm of the night, unaware of the terror that awaited him. The darkness held its breath. A lone guardian, Poeta patrolled the desolate roads, ever vigilant for poachers. His eyes scanned the darkness, alert for any sign of trouble. Little did he know, trouble was about to find him. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness. A red-tailed car sped down the lonely road. Poeta, ever watchful, tracked its progress. The car slowed. It turned sharply, disappearing into a thick cluster of trees. An odd maneuver. Poeta's instincts kicked in. Something was not right. Poeta radioed for backup. He parked his motorcycle by the side of the road. The engine ticked cool in the night air. Approaching the trees cautiously, Poeta scanned the area. There were no tire tracks, no signs of entry. Where had the car gone? The silence was unnerving. The air grew heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl seemed amplified in the stillness. The darkness was almost tangible, wrapping around Poeta like a suffocating blanket. Poeta felt a chill run down his spine. He pulled his coat tighter around him, but it did little to ward off the cold that seemed to seep from the very ground beneath his feet. His breath came out in visible puffs, a stark contrast to the inky blackness surrounding him. A sense of unease settled upon him. It was as if the forest was alive, watching him, waiting. The trees loomed overhead, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to ensnare him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed, that unseen eyes were tracking his every move. He strained his ears, listening for any sound. A twig snapped, echoing like a gunshot in the silence. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a deafening drum in the quiet night. He turned slowly, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. An owl hooted in the distance, its mournful cry adding to the eerie atmosphere. The sound seemed to reverberate through the trees, a haunting melody that sent shivers down his spine. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. And then he heard it. A low, guttural sound, unlike anything he had ever heard before. It was a noise that seemed to come from the very bowels of the earth, a primal, ancient sound that filled him with dread. He froze, every muscle in his body tensed. A whisper carried on the wind. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Words he couldn't quite make out, spoken in a language he didn't understand. The whisper seemed to wrap around him, a ghostly caress that made his skin crawl. The sound sent shivers down his spine. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead, his hands trembling. He wanted to run, to flee from this place, but his legs felt like lead. He was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. It was unlike anything he'd ever heard before, a sound that seemed to come from another world, another time. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing, drawing him in even as it repelled him. He couldn't tear his ears away from it. A cold dread gripped his heart. He felt as if he was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss. The darkness seemed to close in around him, the trees pressing in from all sides. He could barely breathe, his chest tight with fear. Fear tightened its icy grip. He felt trapped, ensnared by the forest and its unseen inhabitants. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. He was alone, vulnerable, and utterly terrified. Poeta knew with chilling certainty that he was not alone. The forest was alive with unseen presences, watching him, waiting. He could feel their eyes on him, their whispers in his ears. He was an intruder in their domain, and they were not pleased. He shone his flashlight into the darkness. The beam cut through the night, illuminating the twisted shapes of the trees. Shadows danced and flickered, creating eerie patterns on the forest floor. He moved the light slowly, searching for any sign of movement. The beam danced among the trees, revealing nothing, or so he thought. For a brief moment, he caught a glimpse of something, a shadow that moved too quickly to be natural. His heart skipped a beat and he swung the flashlight back, but there was nothing there. The forest was silent once more, but Poeta knew that the silence was deceptive. Something was out there, lurking in the darkness, and it was only a matter of time before it revealed itself. Section 5. The Glowing Eyes. A glint of metal flashed in the darkness, catching Poeta's eye. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. Poeta's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a drum. He could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins, making his hands tremble. He moved closer, his flashlight beam fixed on the strange object. The light cut through the darkness, revealing glimpses of twisted branches and shadows that seemed to dance just out of reach. As he stepped into a small clearing, he gasped in terror. The air was thick with an unexplainable tension, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Standing before him were three figures, their silhouettes barely discernible against the dark backdrop of the forest. They seemed to blend into the shadows, their forms shifting and wavering. Their skin was grey and wrinkled, stretched taut over elongated limbs. It looked almost leathery, like the hide of some ancient creature. Their heads were abnormally large, their eyes glowing an eerie red. The light from their eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, casting an unsettling glow on everything around them. The beings stared at him with an unnerving intensity. It felt as though they were looking straight into his soul, reading his every thought and fear. Poeta froze, his blood turning to ice. He had never felt such a paralyzing fear before, a fear that rooted him to the spot and made his mind go blank. He tried to speak, but no sound escaped his lips. His throat felt tight and his mouth was dry. The words he wanted to say were trapped inside him, locked away by his terror. Fear, raw and primal, surged through him. His mind reeled. His training deserted him. He had faced danger before, but nothing like this. This was something otherworldly, something that defied all logic and reason. He was facing something beyond human comprehension. The beings before him were not of this world, and he knew deep down that his life would never be the same again. Section 6. Where is Officer Poeta? Minutes ticked by. The backup. Their headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road. They found Poeta's motorcycle lying on its side. The engine was cold, the keys were missing, but there was no sign of Poeta. The officers fanned urgent as they searched the area. The night was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and the calls of nocturnal creatures, but there was no answer to their calls. Poeta had vanished. Section 7. Impossible footprints. The search continued through the night. Dawn broke, casting a pale light over the scene. The officers followed a trail of footprints leading away from the motorcycle. The footprints were strange, elongated, unnaturally spaced, as if the person who made them had taken impossibly long strides. The footprints led to a nearby cornfield. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The footprints were unlike anything they had ever seen before. They entered the field cautiously, their eyes scanning the tall stalks. The footprints continued for a distance, then stopped abruptly. It was as if the person who made them had simply vanished into thin air. Section 8. Return from nowhere. 18 hours had passed since Poeta's disappearance. Hope was fading. Then a call came over the radio. A farmer, miles away, had found Poeta. He was sitting in the middle of his field, 12 miles from where he disappeared. He was alive, but unresponsive. Poeta was rushed to the hospital. He was in a fetal position, his eyes vacant. His clothes were dry, despite the recent rain. The doctors were baffled. He had burns on the soles of his feet, but no other injuries. What had happened to him? Where had he been? Section 9. A wall of darkness. Poeta remained unresponsive for days. His family and friends were deeply concerned, watching over him with a mix of fear and hope. The doctors were baffled, unable to explain his sudden catatonic state. It was as if he had been plunged into a deep, unreachable abyss. Then he began to cry. The tears flowed uncontrollably, a torrent of emotion that seemed to come from a place of profound despair. It was the first sign of life he had shown in days, but it brought little comfort to those who cared for him. He spoke of the beings, The glowing eyes, they haunted his dreams and waking moments alike. He described them in vivid detail, their piercing gaze burning into his soul. It was as if they were always watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. He said he felt a pressure on his chest, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe, as if an invisible force was trying to suffocate him. This sensation would come and go, leaving him gasping for air and clutching his chest in agony. He was lifted into the air, defying gravity. He floated above the ground, suspended by an unseen power. It was a terrifying experience, one that defied all logic and reason. He felt completely helpless, at the mercy of forces beyond his understanding. He saw a wall of darkness, an impenetrable barrier that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. It was a void, devoid of light and hope, a manifestation of pure evil. He knew instinctively that crossing it would mean certain doom. Two glowing eyes stared out at him, then he blacked out. The last thing he remembered was their cold, unblinking gaze searing into his mind. When he awoke, he was back in the real world. But the memory of those eyes haunted him still. Poeta retired from the police force after the incident. The experience had shaken him to his core, leaving him unable to continue his duties. His colleagues were sympathetic, but they could not fully understand the depth of his trauma. He never fully recovered from his experience. The events of that night left a permanent scar on his psyche, a constant reminder of the horrors he had faced. He became a shadow of his former self, haunted by memories he could not escape. South America has long been a hotspot for paranormal activity. The region is steeped in mystery and legend, with countless stories of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. It is a land where the line between reality and the supernatural is often blurred. The vast open spaces seem to invite the unexplained. The endless plains and dense jungles are the perfect setting for the unknown to manifest. It is a place where anything can happen, and often does. The case of Officer Sergio Poeta remains unsolved. Despite numerous investigations and countless hours of research, no one has been able to explain what happened to him. It is a mystery that continues to baffle experts and laymen alike, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are beyond our understanding. No matter how much we learn or how far we advance, there will always be things that elude our grasp. The unknown is a part of our world, and it always will be. Were the beings extraterrestrial visitors, interdimensional travelers, or something else entirely? Theories abound, but the truth remains elusive. What Poeta encountered that night is still a matter of speculation and debate. The answers, like the vast pampas themselves, remain shrouded in mystery. The truth is out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered. Until then, we can only wonder and speculate, hoping that one day the veil will be lifted and the secrets of the unknown will be revealed.